Are you looking at upgrading to the current GoPro Hero 11 for your underwater filming needs? Well, if that's the case, and specifically if you've been using the GoPro Hero 10 so far, then today's video is going to be useful to you as we're looking at the one big feature that has changed in between the GoPro Hero 10 and the GoPro Hero 11. Coming up. Hey there underwater filmmakers, welcome back to the channel. As always, great to see all you smiling faces. If you've been someone using GoPros to film your underwater adventures, then you have probably thought about upgrading to the current GoPro Hero 11, which came out last fall in 2022. I was at the same place basically a couple months ago, and it took me a while to decide whether or not I should go for the GoPro Hero 11 because I don't think that it really boosts so many improvements over the GoPro Hero 10 that I have been using up until then. But I did decide to go for the 11 for one single reason, one feature that really interested me and that I was really curious to test, and that's the 10-bit color depth that GoPro promised us with the GoPro Hero 11. Other than that feature, I don't think that there's been a lot of improvements on the Hero 11 compared to the Hero 10. There's actually a lot of things that have stayed the same, like the size, the form factor, which is a good thing because it means we can use the same accessories like your housing for underwater. The batteries can be reused, even though there is a new Enduro battery that came out that has just a little extra juice, which is a nice thing to have. But this battery is interchangeable in between the current and the previous model. Also, the frame rates haven't really changed too much. We still get our 30 frames per second at 5.3 K maximum resolution, and we get our 120 frames per second at 4K and the 240, I think it is, at full HD. So all the things which are potentially beneficial to us as an underwater filmmaker haven't really changed. But what has changed is a few other things, apart from the 10-bit color codec, or color depth, I better say. One of them is that we have gotten a slightly higher pixel count on the sensor. Instead of the 23 megapixels that we've had on the GoPro Hero 10, we now have 27 megapixels on the Hero 11. But that's mainly to do with the slightly larger sensor that is being built into the Hero 11. And the sensor is only slightly bigger because the form factor, the ratio of the sensor, has changed. It used to be 4:3 in an aspect ratio, and now we're looking at an 8:7 aspect ratio sensor. So that means that the sensor has increased. It used to be 1/2.3 inches, I think, and the new sensor size is 1/1.9 inches. So slightly bigger sensor and therefore a slightly higher pixel count on that sensor, but it doesn't mean that on your regular 16:9 aspect ratio you're gonna get more pixels. That's not really true. Another improvement that is worth mentioning is the Hypersmooth 5.0, a further development of their Hypersmooth 4.0 that they had on the GoPro Hero 10. And the main difference here is that Hypersmooth 5.0 has an automatic mode that can determine itself how much stabilization the image really needs depending on how much the camera is moving, and therefore it can then adjust the crop that it needs to put into your image, and oftentimes it ends up cropping in less than what the GoPro Hero 10 would crop in on one of the modes that you set the Hypersmooth to. That can be a good thing, but for me that isn't something that would make me upgrade from a GoPro Hero 10 to a GoPro Hero 11. So let's put these features aside for now and let's have a look at the one feature that I was most interested in testing out, the 10-bit color depth. Now, I took the GoPro Hero 11 as well as the GoPro Hero 10 with me on a recent trip to Egypt, and I wanted to test them out in the field. So I placed them next to each other on a little handle that I put together so that I was able to capture pretty much identical footage in identical situations with identical conditions to be able to see what difference that 10-bit color depth would make in post-production. Obviously, pulling out the footage and just looking at it side by side on the computer without having done any corrections, the footage looks pretty much the same. Even if I do a little color grade and a little color correction on the footage, it doesn't really, you can't really see much of a difference. It behaves pretty much the same, and that was to be expected. But the big thing happens when you start isolating colors, because, and this is important, when we look at an 10-bit color depth as the GoPro Hero 11 has, we're looking at over 1 billion individual colors that the camera can record. Compared to an 8-bit color depth as the GoPro Hero 10 and all the previous GoPro models have, we're looking there at around 16.7 million different individual colors. So it's a huge difference of how many more colors the 10-bit color depth can see and work with. And this is something that you'll really notice once you start doing more aggressive color grading, and if you want to try to manipulate individual single colors or shades of colors. So to demonstrate to you what difference a 10-bit color depth compared to an 8-bit color depth can make, I have taken this clip here and I've applied a just basic color correction onto both of the clips, the Hero 11 and the Hero 10. And they look pretty much identical. There's not much difference that you can see here. But now let's say I want to make that coral that is behind my scorpion fish, I want to make that, just that coral, I want to make that in a different color or increase the saturation of that color, for example. So I can select that color and then use a mask to just mask out just that color in my image and then manipulate just the masked out area. The benefit of the 10-bit color depth gets visible once I apply my mask and I then start manipulating the color a little bit. You can see that on the 10-bit footage, that color gets selected much more exactly. On the 8-bit footage, we get a bit of a spill, and that can be quite easily seen if we go back to our mask and make that visible and have a look at all the masked areas, all the areas that are selected. Now we can see that even on the coral that is in front or below our scorpion fish, certain parts of that coral, which is another color actually, but certain parts of that coral are also selected. And if I then start manipulating that masked area, it's obviously going to be manipulating some of the areas on the lower piece of coral as well. And you can see that you get a few little blotches that have taken up a different color now. It's not something that is visible right away, but if you do know what you're looking for and if you take a little time to look at the image a bit more in detail, you will see that something odd's happening there, and there's these blotches that should not really be there in the lower part of that coral. And that's really all the magic of the 10-bit color depth, giving you extra options in manipulating individual colors, separating these colors a little better, and just being able to play around in color in your post-production a little more extreme. So if you're someone who doesn't do that, someone who does a basic color correction and maybe a mild color grade on your underwater, GoPro underwater footage, then I don't really see a reason why you should be upgrading to the GoPro Hero 11 if, for example, you're now on the GoPro Hero 10. It's not really gonna be a huge benefit to you. But on the other hand, if you are that person who wants to really aggressively grade your underwater footage, who wants to push individual colors and be very creative with your footage in terms of the grade that you apply to the footage, well then the upgrade might be well worth going for the GoPro Hero 11. Hopefully this video was useful to you and I was able to demonstrate whether or not an upgrade to the new GoPro Hero 11 with its newly introduced 10-bit color depth would be beneficial to you. How do you see that 10-bit color depth? Is it something that you're really excited about, that you're using if you're already on a GoPro Hero 11? Or is it something that is not so important to you and will not really make a big difference in your workflow and the way that you color correct and color grade your underwater footage? Please let me know down in the comment section below. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about that. And that's it again for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to learn a little bit more about how you can get the best possible footage with your action cams, I'll put a link to a video over here to the side, which will give you some tips and tricks on how to achieve cinematic looking footage with your action cams. Until next time, have a fantastic week and keep capturing your amazing underwater adventures. I will see you next week.